Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back. I am your host, Coach Javon, as always, and I am excited for today's episode. Um, Obviously, if you guys clicked on the stuff, but it's really interesting because if you guys follow me on social media, or like Instagram or whatever, maybe I posted a question on my story about um, youth athletes. You think the sports are dying, specifically soccer as well. Do you guys think soccer across the US or maybe some states is dying compared to others? So thought I'd get some feedback from you guys. And sorry if I'm breathing too loud here on this, but just wanted to get an opinion and see what you guys think. I talked to various people. Thanks for everybody who voted on the poll and as well as responded to me based off like what you guys think and stuff like that. So, but I am excited. Thank you. Welcome. If you are new, consider subscribing. We're going over different topics. We talk about exercise science. We talk about different training strategies. We talk about how to become a better athlete. If you guys, even if you're in a gym, right? How do you program better? So we talk about different things like that. But today's episode is specifically about youth sports, um, and how it's evolved since maybe I was younger, or if you guys are a little bit older and comparing it to the kids now. Obviously, we might have a little bias, but it's always interesting, right? So welcome again, welcome. So as I mentioned earlier, right? My first question I put on the poll, and this is on. I took a screenshot, and it should be up on the screen. Um, the first question was, do you think youth sports are dying across the U.S.? So here's the percentages. 77% of people who voted said no, and 22% of people said yes. Okay. For the second question, which I'm gonna load right here, um, is youth soccer dying across the U.S. Right? And they said this is just a poll on Facebook, and then I'll go over the Instagram ones, which I don't know if I still have it or not. But anyways, we do have the Facebook ones, but this one is 69% said no, and 31% said yes. So as you can see, there is a lot of people that said no, and I was just curious to see about the people that said yes, because I think I'm on that kind of verge of saying yes. I do think it's somewhat dying, um, but I'm a little biased, and I'll give you my reasoning why. And why don't I just share my reasonings, right? So, do I think youth sports are dying across the U.S.? My answer, and this is just my opinion, and just from my experience and what I see now out here, and obviously I moved from Tucson, Montana, but I lived all over, so I kind of seen different territories and different sports around the cities. But anyways, my answer is yes. I do think it's dying, but I could be wrong. So I'm not one of those people who's like, oh no, it's got to be this way, right? So no, the reason I think it's it's dying or slowing down a little bit, I think is because there's many times where I drive through cities, where I drive through even my own town now. And this could be kind of everywhere. It doesn't have to be where I live now, but just think about it. Just picture it in your head, right? You're driving across town, for whatever reason, and you spot, let's say, a playground, or you spot a, open soccer field, basketball courts, tennis courts, whatever it may be, right? How many times do you see kids playing out there on their own or with their friends or whatever it may be, playing soccer, maybe just kicking the ball around, or playing basketball, shooting some hoops, right? Even adults now, I don't really see, depending on what the weather is. Obviously, different regions have different weathers and different seasons and stuff like that. I know there's a lot of people out that go play street basketball, and there's a lot of people that play indoor basketball at gyms. So obviously, I don't see that. So I could be wrong, right? As I mentioned, but I think there's definitely a shift in the way that young athletes, are being, I guess, I wouldn't say rest, but developed. Because personally, when I was growing up, right, I think a lot of the times, and obviously we grew up in an era where social media or internet and all that stuff kind of came after as we were growing up in high school and middle school, but we didn't spend time playing video games. Obviously, you do play video games, but a lot of the times that wasn't the priority in a sense, right? So if you were an athlete, you were trying to accomplish whatever goal it may be, right? And I remember as a kid, my dad used to take me to the soccer fields because he played. He used to tag me along, and I was just around, a bunch of soccer dudes, and ended up developing a love for the sport, right? So there was that I guess that I wouldn't say mentorship, but I guess I was just around soccer all the time. That's kind of all I wanted to do in a sense, right? So I think being influenced now as a young athlete or as a young kid that see all these stars and they want to become a professional athlete or get a college scholarship, but then also turn around and play 6 hours of video games, right? Because I think now there's different routes or ways that kids can make money. So sometimes that could be their focus where they're not taking the sport as serious. And this is just my take on it, right? So that's my answer for the first one. For youth soccer specifically, I say yes. And this is the reason why. I think, and you guys can always comment or do whatever you guys want with the video because I think you guys have some great points as well. But I think the reason I think it's dying, at least kind of in my region, and I could be biased again because I don't see it as often anymore. Because I live in Montana, right? This is not a soccer city, but I think a lot of clubs now, even recreational like YMCA and leagues where it's not supposed to be about money, right? So I think a lot of it has to come down to the clubs trying to make money and not focusing on developing players. And the reason I say that is you can even take it a step further or even, to the extreme where you look at the national team and yes, they are developing players, but guess where a lot of those teams on players on the national teams are being developed. They're not being really developed in the US. They're actually being sent to Germany, Europe, all these other places where soccer is heavy, where it's the predominant sport, like a macho male sport. Compared to the US, football is taking over like basically all the sport. There's basketball, there's baseball. And I think the reason is they take a lot of parents or even athletes take a look like, well, I'm not gonna make money playing soccer, right? Unless I'm a huge star. Compared to if they go play baseball and make a contract, they're gonna make way more money than they would playing on an MLS team, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with um the clubs trying to make money, paying better coaches is what they're always gonna say is like, oh, we need money to hire better coaches. But sometimes that's not even the case. It just takes grit, heart, commitment, time to be able to develop players correctly, right? Obviously, as you progress and get older, and you get more elite or more competitive, obviously, then yes, you're probably gonna have to pay a little bit better to be on a better team. Unfortunately, that's just how it is in the U.S. Compared to teams in Mexico, if you take a look at Mexican teams, Brazilian teams, South America teams, those guys don't have money, right? So they end up just playing in the street with their friends or growing up playing soccer all their life, and a lot of times when you see those teams play MLS teams or play the US, a lot of the times the US loses, right? Because the developments are a little bit different. So that's my reasoning, but I love to hear what you guys think. And I'm also going to share a little bit about some of the people that replied to me, and I think some people made interesting points. And the first one is James DeLuhash. Shout out to my boy James out of Tucson. He said that he does think soccer is dying in the US. He said, but he also said that he thinks soccer could grow, which I also believe it can grow, and it has been growing a little bit, thanks to the MLS as that is expanding to different states. But he does believe the only way he sees it being a top, sport in the U.S. is if the men's national team win some cup at least, right? To be able to look at that sport more respectively, and we'll get into the whole female conversation and stuff like that later on because somebody else sent me that, so I'd love to cover that as well. But um, he also thinks that the way that European teams develop their players is not necessarily about money. It's about developing those players within the club, and then they sell them. Right? That's how the club should make money. I think that's how it should be. Where hey, you don't have to pay $1,000 a month to play on this club. How about you pay $200 for the year? You sign this contract, and obviously you can be here for a couple years. And if we develop you and another team wants you, then we get a cut of that, right? So I think that should be. I think that's fair. And then obviously the kid will get money too, right? Um, and then he also said that he thinks every MLS team, USL, basically all these, smaller leagues in the US that are professional, um, could be more popular if they have much better athletes playing rather than them playing football in a sense, right? So as I mentioned earlier, football is one of those bigger sports and stuff like that where the attention is not necessarily derived to some of these leagues. Hence the reason why some of them are not making money. Hence the reason why they're charging a lot more money. That's just my opinion, but I love to hear what you guys say again. The next person that replied to me was my boy Samson Martinez out of Pasco, Washington. Shout out to my boy Samson, if you're watching. He said he does think it's dying. He says too many clubs focus on winning over developing young talent. I mean, you could be a little bit, but every team wants to win. That's just my opinion. Instead of developing talent, that's where I do think a lot of them are, not developing players. Obviously, if a kid's not good enough or whatever it may be, hey, that's why you have B teams. That's why you have scrimmage teams to be able to keep that player a little bit longer until he becomes better, right? And that should be the reason why I think there should be a shift in the space of soccer. Um, and he said, we got to go back to the days when kids just competed for YMCA teams and loved just playing the sport. That's what I brought up earlier. That I do agree with Samson here. I do think that's a valid point. I think more kids shouldn't play in leagues where they're paying a lot of money and not getting that return on investment, in the sense of like, is your kid really enjoying, or are you just, trying to make him be recruited because he plays for a big club or whatever it may be, right? So just because you play for a good club and a good coach doesn't mean that athlete's always going to be really good and end up getting a contract. Sometimes it just takes them playing in different leagues and different, development stages to be able to, better prepare him for different types of soccer, I think. So that was what I had on Facebook, I think. But let me go to Instagram, because I did have a couple people respond to me on Instagram, which I think you guys would find this interesting. So this one came from Fernando. Shout out to my boy Fernando again, out of Pasco, Washington. Um, he said he does think soccer is dying because he said kids would rather be playing video games all over, and they're all over technology, and those few who have the passion, is not enough for them to be able to play in those higher leagues, right? He also thinks the parents have some sort of fault in it. They just don't partake in their kids, the practices sometimes. And this could be true, right? If the parent's busy or whatever it be, can't, get off of work early. Obviously, there's different situations and a million reasons. Obviously, we don't want to go down to that rabbit hole, but, it could be an issue where they may not have a ride, right? It might be in a situation where, hey, there are playing soccer, but it's, 13 miles away, and these kids are 10, 11, 12 years old, and their parents don't want to take them, right? So I guess you could be a little bit in that situation where, how do you, maybe you got to make some friends in the neighborhood. Maybe you got to hang out with some of them old folks in the neighborhood. Play with your dad or whatever it may be. But for parents that are listening, this could be a good thing to think about if you do have athletes playing. Sometimes they just got to love the sport instead of making them love the sport, in a sense. So that's just always been my tip for young athletes, especially because I've coached soccer, I've coached young kids, and I think one of the main things kids should focus on is loving the sport instead of their parents trying to make them play that sport, in a sense, right? Obviously, like, for example, if you have kids and they know you played a certain sport and you put them in that sport, obviously they want to follow your footsteps, but don't make it seem like it's forced on them, in a sense, right? Make sure they actually love playing the game. And I think that's where a lot of the misconception is, of young athletes today. They don't really have that passion or that drive of like, hey, I want to play soccer today. I want to play tomorrow. I want to play Thursday. Hey, I got injured, but I want to get back in the pitch as fast as possible. Right. So I just think there's not that fire in kids anymore. And I don't know what it is, right? I wouldn't know. So my kids are really small, so I don't know yet. Um, yeah, he also said that the systems nowadays, like the way that the programs work, they're just not as effective for low income families as well, which I do agree. Sometimes, it shouldn't cost money to go play a certain sport. If you're in a big league, obviously you're gonna have to work or pay something. Or if your parents can't pay for it, find a solution for that kid, because it's that kid's future, not necessarily yours, in a sense, right? So shout out to my boy Fernando again. We are moving on to the next one, which I think is very debatable. I think a lot of people will like this one. This is from one of my good friends down in Tucson, Savannah. Shout out to you. Thank you for responding. I think you had the best, or I would say interesting response. She thinks it is dying, soccer. Not all the sports, but she does think soccer is dying. She made up a great point, but I wouldn't say a great point. I would say an interesting point here. Because she took a sociology class in her undergrad studies about, it was a sociology in regards to sport, I believe. And she said one of the major things in the States is that, the only reason we participate in soccer is, well, they think that she thinks that the only reason they participate in soccer, at least the men's soccer, is because of the women's, which is going to bring a debate, right? Obviously the women's feel underpaid, compared to the men. And again, we go back to the money issue, right? How much money are the females bringing in, and how much money are the males bringing in, right? So I think there's that controversy where it's just a numbers game. Again, it's the money, not necessarily the development of players, right? I do think it's unfair, to be honest. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, well, they shouldn't get paid that much. I do believe they should get compensated for winning World Cups and doing way better than the men's. I do support that. Um, the men just need to step it up, or they need to figure out how to develop better players, which I think they're starting to get a little bit better. But again, I think they're still stuck on their old ways. And I don't know who the president of the U.S. Soccer Federation is, but shout out if you ever get to watch this. But she brought up a good point. So she said that in Europe, the main sport, right, it's going to be soccer. If you go anywhere else in the world besides the U.S., soccer is going to be predominantly the main sport anywhere else. Um, so Europe is not fully accepted that women can play the sport, which I would say it's maybe because I know there's a big soccer league for women's, just as it is of the men's. Recently, I think in the past, I think it's shifting, Savannah. I think it is something that is going to evolve into a big league in the European states, because obviously their men's team is going to be better, 10 times better than the women's. But in the states, we cherish women's soccer. Um, One, because they're good at it. Again, the women's soccer is, very good at soccer. Men are also okay with the fact that women are playing the sport that they deem not manly, which why he has the full support that it has the full support that it does. And she's one that brought up the point about Americans' main sports is going to be football, baseball, where they bring in that revenue. They have more fans, and it's been established for years. And and if you look at the comparison, women playing in, like, for example, football, because I know some there's some female athletes that play football, baseball, playing a man predominantly sport isn't, I wouldn't say, accepted yet in the states. I think it's something that obviously will develop over time as the world has shifted, and there's different, you got to watch what you say and all this other stuff. But I do think she brought up this interesting point, and I want to see what you guys think. As a viewer, do you guys believe what she's saying, where essentially soccer isn't as big as these other sports, where she thinks that's the reason why um soccer will die eventually. But there's been a shift and changes. There's been new teams adding to the MLS all over the country. So I think doing that brings a lot more, I would say, money. Obviously, it would bring more teams to certain areas where they get to develop players. For example, when you're in Tucson, Real Salt Lake is there. So if you play for a team that belongs to the Real Salt Lake, they can pick you up potentially to go play for Real Salt Lake. Teams like Sounders, Portland, they all have the development leagues, right? In there's areas. So I wanted to see what you guys think. Obviously, this is a short video, and it was just the controversial topic of, do you think youth sports are dying in the U.S.? And then also, do you think U.S. youth soccer is shifted or dying in the U.S.? And I'll bring in one last point that I learned today from a soccer coach here in Montana at a Providence, Danny. He thinks he doesn't think it's dying. He thinks, sorry, that it's just more organized. Like, the kids' lives are more organized than when we were kids, due to phones, due to school, due to parents, due to the way that their daily lives compared to maybe when we grew up as parents, or if you're caught that end of no cell phones yet, right? Obviously at that time we had no distractions, or we had no way to communicate in a sense of like, hey, let's go meet up at the park, or let's go meet up at the thing, and you just showed up and you guys just did whatever, right? So he brought up a good point. He just thinks it's more established in a sense of they're more organized, or on a schedule in a sense, compared to maybe when we grew up, right? So all good points, all valid. But yeah, just wanted to see what you guys think. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this video. If I should make some more questions where you guys can obviously submit your answers and some reasoning behind it. I love to share it and get some comments on here and see what you guys think. But I don't want to hold you guys up any longer. Let me know what you guys think again. Subscribe, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments what I should ask next. I can't even talk today, dude. It's late. Asks next. I don't know, dude. Whatever. Anyways, hit me up. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Jovan Rojas. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm also on not Tinder. I'm also on TikTok. Sorry, it's just so similar. But love y'all. Take care. and wash your hands. We don't want you guys getting sick.